Hi folks, HR Funk here with another ammunition efficiency assessment. You might recall that I produced a couple of other videos like this during the course of the last couple of months. In the first one, I was looking at the renowned 158 grain lead semi-wide cutter plus P hollow point 38 special load. And in the last one, I was looking at some legacy 9mm loads, specifically the 115 grain Winchester Silvertip and the 115 grain Federal BPLE. And I really did not intend to make another video like this, at least not this soon, but when I produced that last video with the 9mm ammunition, I included some more modern 9mm loads to compare the legacy ammunition to. And in the course of the presentation, I mentioned that I really wish I had some Federal HST, because in the past, when I've tested that ammunition through handguns and through submachine guns, it has performed very, very well, but I did not have any to include in that test. When I produced the video, I put it up and I thought that was going to be pretty much it, but shortly thereafter I was contacted by Ian, and once again I have to say I have the best viewers on the internet, not just on YouTube, but the best viewers on the internet. All of you just continue to amaze me time after time after time with your willingness to help me out with the things that I'm doing here on the channel. Ian sent me an email and he said he would be happy to provide me with some Federal HST ammunition. Now, stop and think about this for a moment, because this is not inexpensive ammunition. But he asked me specifically what kind I needed, and I told him typically I need either 9mm or 40 Smith & Wesson with this type of ammunition, and I like the loads that are in 9mm 124 grain, and in the 40 Smith & Wesson I like the 165 grain weight. And shortly thereafter, I got a shipment from Target Sports USA. It arrived right here at my doorstep, and I had a 50-round box of the 165 grain 40 Smith & Wesson and the 124 grain 9mm HST ammunition. Thank you, Ian. And as I said, I have the greatest viewers on the internet, but I have to focus in on one specifically, because Ian told me his son, who just celebrated his 4th birthday a few days ago, I think it was last week, is a big fan of the channel, and that's Tobias Finn. Tobias, thanks for watching. I hope you like this video. I wouldn't have been able to make it if your dad hadn't helped me out, so be sure to give him a big hug. So let's get on with the video, and I'll tell you about just exactly what I did to test the ammunition and what the results were. Now, if you've seen those previous ammo testing videos that I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, you already know the process I'm using. And if you haven't seen them, why not? Go back and watch them. They're good videos. Anyway, if you haven't seen them, the process that I'm using is not my creation. It was developed by Dick Fairburn, and it's a way that we can use water jugs and the bullet's performance in water jugs and use his conversion formula to replicate how that bullet would have performed had it been fired into 10% calibrated ballistic gel. Once again, I'm not going to go into the explanation of how he developed that process. That is his to explain. So there is a link in the description section of this video. You can click on that. It will take you to Dick's video, and he will tell you exactly how he developed this process for comparing bullets using water. At this point in the video, I have to address some comments that I've received on those past ammo assessment videos that I've produced, and these comments have been repeated by more than one viewer. The first has to do with intermediate barrier penetration. A lot of you have said you would like to have me shoot through some sort of barrier before the bullet gets to the water jugs. One of the ones that gets mentioned a lot is denim, but I've also seen plywood, I've seen glass, I've seen the other type of intermediate barriers that are used in the FBI's testing protocol. The reason I don't do that is because water is a standard. And one of my goals with these videos is to present the information to all of you so you can conduct your own tests with your own ammunition, because at the end of the day, it really isn't important what I say about the ammunition you're carrying. What's important is that you are confident in that ammunition. And when we start to introduce variables, and in this case, intermediate barriers, a lot of things can have a bearing on exactly how the bullet performs. For example, if I use denim, is it brand new denim, or is it denim that's been washed 200 times? Or is it denim from Levi's, or is it denim from, I don't know, Wranglers or someplace like that? And is all denim the same? I don't know. I'm not a denim expert. Same thing with plywood, same thing with drywall, same thing with glass, etc., etc., etc. So rather than do that, I would rather use a constant that is always going to be the same. Water is always going to be the same. It's not going to be any more dense one time than it is the next time, unless I guess you're using salt water as opposed to fresh water, but I'm only using fresh water. So when we have a constant, we can look at the bullet's performance and make the assumption that if a bullet penetrates deeper in water, then all other things being equal, and I cannot overemphasize that aspect, that same bullet will penetrate deeper in other substances. Okay, are you with me there? It doesn't mean that it's going to penetrate to the same depth in another substance that it does in the water, but if bullet A penetrates deeper in water than bullet B, and all other things are equal while the bullets are traveling through a different substance, bullet A should still penetrate to a greater depth than bullet B. Same thing with expansion. The bullet that expands to a greater diameter in water should expand to a greater diameter in another substance. So once again, if bullet A expands to a greater diameter in water and we shoot it into another substance, it should still expand to a greater diameter than bullet B, all things being equal when fired into that other substance. So that's the reason I'm not introducing intermediate barriers. I've done that kind of thing before, but I don't want to use that type of data for these videos. The other thing that a lot of you have asked for in the comment section of those previous videos is some data from shorter barreled handguns that are more appropriate for concealed carry applications. And that's something I am going to do. I'm happy to tell you that in this video I'm going to be testing not one but two shorter barreled handguns. I'm going to be testing them side by side with longer barreled duty size handguns, so we'll be able to see the comparison between both of those types of firearms, as well as any difference in the results that might be gained or lost as a result of longer or shorter barrels. So without further ado, here are the handguns that I'm going to be using for this ammunition effectiveness assessment. Starting from left to right, I have two 9mm chambered handguns and two that are chambered for the .40 Smith & Wesson cartridge. The first is my Masada 9S, aka the Masada Slim. This is one of the two CCW style handguns. This has a 3.4-inch barrel. Next to it is its big brother. This is the IWI Masada Tactical with a 4.6-inch barrel. Next is my first generation M&P 40C from Smith & Wesson. This has a 3.5-inch barrel. And the last is my Smith & Wesson Performance Center M&P 40L. This has a 5-inch barrel. So we'll be able to take a look at exactly what kind of velocities we're getting relative to the short and long barrels with each of these handguns, as well as what type of bullet performance we get when we're shooting them into that water. And first up is going to be the Masada 9S, firing the 124 grain Federal HST 9mm cartridge. This has a rated velocity from Federal of 1,150 feet per second, and prior to conducting the water test, I fired 3 rounds of this ammunition from the 9S over my chronograph out at the range, and I ended up with an average velocity of 1,144 feet per second, so just slightly below, very slightly below that rated velocity. Let's go out and see how it performed when I actually tested it against the water jugs. And that bullet went through one jug, 2 jugs, cracked the back of jug number 3, but I do not see a hole of any sort on jug number 4. There's our bullet. And here we are back in the shop to take a look at the results of that test with the Masada 9S, starting at the top of the page. As I said, the 124 grain Federal HST had an average velocity out of the 3.4-inch barrel of that handgun of 1,144 feet per second. When I conducted the water jug test, I found the bullet in jug number 3, meaning it completely penetrated 2 jugs for 12 inches worth of penetration, and it broke the back of jug number 3, giving an additional 6.75 inches added to that 12 inches for a total of 18.75 inches of penetration in water. When we plug in Dick Fairbairn's conversion factor of 1.55, that results in an approximate penetration in calibrated ballistic gel of 12.1 inches. That's pretty close to ideal performance with this bullet. And that's pretty much what I've come to expect with Federal HST. The expanded diameter of this bullet is 0.620 inches, so it expanded to 62 caliber, and it retained 100% of its original weight. So that is tremendous, tremendous performance. It's what I've come to expect from the Federal HST, and it's nice to see I kicked things off with that type of performance. Now let's move on and see if that continued with the other handguns that I'm using. Next up is going to be the Masada Tactical. As I said earlier, this handgun has a 4.6 inch barrel, and I'm going to be firing the same 124 grain Federal HST, but when I checked the velocity with this handgun, the average was 1,215 feet per second, so that's significantly higher than we saw with this same ammunition when fired out of the shorter barrel from the Masada 9S. So I was very interested to see what that was going to do in terms of penetration and expansion when I conducted the water jug test. Let's head out to the range and see how it went. From the barrel of the Masada Tactical, that 124 grain bullet went through one jug, two jugs, it is in jug number 3. There is a slight bulge on the back of jug number 3, but it did not break the jug. And that additional 71 feet per second achieved through the 4.6 inch barrel of the IWI Masada Tactical definitely did have a measurable effect on the bullet's performance. When fired into the water jugs, once again we found the bullet in jug number 3. Now you'll recall that's the same jug we found the bullet in after firing through the shorter barrel of the Masada 9S. So it completely penetrated 2 jugs for 12 inches of penetration, but this time around the bullet did not break the back of jug number 3, rather it marked it. So it gets an additional 6 inches, not the 6.75 inches that we saw with the shorter barreled Masada 9S. So we have a total of 18 inches of penetration in water. When we plug that into the conversion formula, we come up with 11.61 inches we would expect to see if we fired this into 10% calibrated ballistic gel. Now you might be wondering why the penetration was less even though the velocity was so much higher, and the reason is because at the higher velocity the bullet opens more quickly, meaning the water exerts more drag on the bullet faster, slowing it down at a more rapid rate, meaning it doesn't penetrate as deeply as it would if it was traveling a little slower. This seems kind of counterintuitive, but when you consider something like a parachute opening more quickly so it would slow down a skydiver faster than a parachute that opens slower, it's the same principle. However, that greater velocity also resulted in greater expansion. This bullet expanded to 0.690 inches, so almost 70 caliber from a 9mm bullet. That is tremendous. It also had 100% weight retention. So if I'm carrying this in my Masada Tactical, I'm feeling pretty good about the performance of these bullets, and I don't think I would worry about the half-inch less penetration depth at all, because I think this is going to create a very effective wound. Next up is our first 40 Smith & Wesson of the day. Once again, this is my M&P 40C with a 3.5 inch barrel. It's going to be firing the 165 grain Federal HST load. This load is rated by Federal as having a velocity of 1,050 feet per second. Out of that barrel of the Smith & Wesson 40C, it achieved a velocity of 1,052, so the velocity came in right where Federal rated it. Let's head out to the range and see how this load performed. From the M&P Compact, that bullet went through one jug, two jugs,
It broke the back of jug number 3 and marked the front of jug number 4. It is in jug number 3.
And here are our first 40 Smith & Wesson results. When fired into those jugs, this 165 grain HST bullet was recovered from jug number 3, meaning it completely penetrated 2 jugs for 12 inches, but it also marked the front of jug number 4, meaning it gets an additional credit for 7.5 inches of penetration, meaning its total penetration in water is 19.5 inches. When we plug that into the conversion formula, we come up with approximately 12.6 inches we could expect if we were firing this same bullet into calibrated 10% ballistic gel. So the heavier bullet of the 40 Smith & Wesson did achieve a little bit greater penetration depth than we saw with the 9mm bullets, and I think that's what we generally expect. The expanded diameter of this bullet is over 65 caliber. It expanded to 0.655 inches, and it has a retained weight of 100%. So that's very good performance from this bullet. The 40 Smith & Wesson has fallen out of favor in recent years, but obviously, at least with the Federal HST line, it is still capable of very, very good defensive performance. And last but not least is my Smith & Wesson Performance Center M&P 40L, also firing the 165 grain HST load. Out of the 5-inch barrel of this pistol, the cartridge averaged a velocity of 1,091 feet per second. So 41 feet per second above the rated velocity for this load. How did that translate in terms of performance when I conducted the water jug test? Let's head out to the range and find out.
And that 165 grain HST from the 5-inch M&P went through 1 jug, 2 jugs, marked the back of jug number 3, did not break it, and dented the back of jug number 4.
And here are our final test results for the Federal HST ammunition. Once again, this bullet was found in jug number 3. I think all 4 of our bullets were found in jug number 3. So it completely penetrated 2 jugs for a total of 12 inches of penetration. The performance of this bullet was identical to that we saw with the shorter barreled M&P 40C. Once again, it marked the front of jug number 4, meaning it gets an additional 7.5 inches worth of penetration credit, giving it a total penetration in water of 19.5 inches. Plugging that into the conversion formula gets the exact same penetration depth that we saw before of 12.6 inches we could expect if we were firing this same bullet into calibrated 10% ballistic gel. The greater velocity this time around imparted by that 5-inch barrel did result in slightly greater expansion for the bullet. It expanded to 0.665 inches, so 66.5 caliber as opposed to 65.5 caliber. I don't know how much difference that's going to make. It's a very good expansion for both bullets, but we did see a little bit more because of the higher velocity this time around with this particular cartridge. After testing the Federal HST cartridge through all 4 of these handguns, it's pretty easy to see that there's not really a bad combination here in front of you. The 240 Smith & Wesson cartridges both penetrated to the greatest depth, which is not surprising considering they outweigh the 9mm bullets by 40 grains. But the greatest expansion of the entire test came from this single 9mm 124 grain bullet. This was the highest velocity achieved throughout the test. And the expanded diameter of this 9mm bullet is actually greater than the 240 Smith & Wesson bullets. This was 0.655 inches and this was 0.665 inches in diameter. The 124 grain 9mm here from the Masada Tactical expanded to 0.690 inches, so almost 70 caliber. And as I said early on, the performance from the short barrel of the Masada 9S is pretty much ideal. 12 inches of penetration we got an expanded diameter of 0.620 inches and 100% weight retention. So if you're carrying federal HST, you're carrying good ammunition, and I wouldn't worry too much about whether or not it's going to perform well as long as you have good shot placement. So there you go, folks. That's going to do it for my ammunition effectiveness assessment of the federal HST ammunition. I'm happy to say it performed very well in these tests, just like it performed very well every time that I've tested it in the past. But here at the end of the video, I still have to say there's no such thing as a magic bullet. You can have the greatest, most effective handgun bullet ever devised, but if your shot placement is terrible, you're still not going to end up with an effective wound. So don't pin all your hopes and dreams to getting the most spectacular bullet ever imagined. Make sure you still get out to the range and train with your firearms. Also, I want to say another big thank you to Ian and Tobias Finn. Thank you very much for your assistance in making this video and your support of the channel. That's going to do it for now, folks. Make sure you stop by hrfunk.com, check out the news section there, make sure you stop by the product information page, and take note of all the discount codes by the links to the products that I've reviewed here on the channel. See you next time, and until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.